A dying man stands in a bunker 90 floors beneath Manhattan. He's looking at the last people alive on Earth. They're old men in expensive suits. Behind them is a bank of frozen human embryos and the technology to restart civilization. He's been told that every other bunker has gone silent. Every other survivor group has died. The surface is a radioactive wasteland where nothing lives, not even rats, not even insects. These men are humanity's final chance. He raises his guns and kills every single one of them. This is Punisher: The End, and Marvel published it on a separate label because they knew what it really was. In 2004, writer Garth Ennis and artist Richard Corbin created a one-shot comic for Marvel's Max imprint. Max was the adults-only line, no comics code, no restrictions, and most importantly, no direct association with the main Marvel brand. The comic was called Punisher: The End. And it's not an action story. It's not a revenge fantasy. It's a 48-page argument about whether the human race deserves to even exist, told through the eyes of the one man uniquely unqualified to answer that question. This is arguably the darkest single issue Marvel has ever published, and they've done almost nothing to promote it since. Let me walk you through why. The story opens at Sing Sing Maximum Security Federal Penitentiary. Nuclear war is imminent. The prison governor receives orders from Albany: shoot the prisoners. All of them. But this is not a normal prison. This is D Block. And in D Block, there's one inmate that even the guards speak about in whispers: Frank Castle, the Punisher. An old man now, sent to Sing Sing after decades of waging his private war on crime. The guards describe his first month inside: 9 inmates murdered. Every gang, every race, every faction sent someone to take him down. He shivved or strangled every one of them. A judge once said that sending a man to Sing Sing was like feeding a tiger meat. The guards approach his cell with rifles. They look into his eyes. And then, the lights go out. The bombs hit while the execution squad is still on the cell block. In the chaos and darkness, Frank takes a rifle. When the survivors crawl out of the prison's fallout shelter nearly a year later, the world above is unrecognizable. The clouds are burning. Richard Corbin draws this in a full-page splash that's among the most haunting images in Marvel history. Frank Castle, old and gray, standing on rubble with a rifle, looking up at a sky that is literally on fire. Frank heads south toward New York City. His only companion is Paris Peters, a small-time con artist from the prison. Paris asks him why. Frank's answer is 2 words: work still to be done. Paris clarifies, "You mean killing, right?" Frank says yes. What follows is one of the most devastating road sequences in comics. Ennis and Corbin show us the aftermath in specific, suffocating detail. A refugee camp that became a graveyard. A soup kitchen where everyone died sitting at tables. Cars frozen on highways because the electromagnetic pulse killed every engine. It begins snowing soot so thick that progress becomes impossible. Frank narrates. He had a wife, a son, and a daughter. They died a long time ago on a sunny day in Central Park. He blamed evil men for their deaths and went to war with murderers, racketeers, thieves, and dealers. He describes the weakness he was fighting as a feeding ground that stretched beyond the world. The evil that it fed would never end, so he decided neither would his war. They reached New York. Brooklyn took a direct hit. Manhattan was a near miss, but near enough. Jersey was flattened. Paris, who has never been south of White Plains, stares at the skyline of a city that no longer exists. They cross the East River on a makeshift vessel. Paris mentions something that Frank had already noticed. They've not seen a single living thing since leaving the shelter. Not a rat, not a bug, not a blade of grass. Ennis writes what might be his most cutting observation in the entire story. You do not adapt or overcome. You do not build a stockade to keep away the mutants. You do not find yourself reborn with superpowers. All you do is what they are doing now, walking through the bones of everything. Then Frank reveals the purpose of the journey. After the Twin Towers collapsed, subway stations in Lower Manhattan were closed for repairs. Most people accepted that. But there was a bunker 90 floors beneath the surface, and a dying man in Sing Sing, a brilliant engineer named William Teacher, gave Frank the access code and the location. They finally get there and enter the bunker. Tranquilizer gas knocks them unconscious as the elevator descends. Frank wakes up in a medical bay. A doctor in a hazmat suit tells him the truth. He's absorbed too much radiation. He has hours to live. Paris is even worse off, sedated because the pain was unbearable. But here's where the story pivots from post-apocalyptic survival into something else entirely. The doctor explains the bunker's situation. There's been self-harm, the ending of lives, morale is collapsing, and then he says something that changes everything. They thought Frank might be from the Washington, D.C. bunker because he had the access code. He must be one of them. Frank overpowers the guards and enters the main chamber. What he finds is a room full of old men. Oilmen, generals, computer billionaires, senators, captains of industry. Teacher called them the coven. They had hired Teacher to design 4 bunkers: Los Angeles, Dallas, Washington, and New York. Each was deep enough to survive a nuclear attack. Each was capable of supporting life for 100 years. Each contained a store of frozen human embryos and the scientific personnel to ensure their survival. These men knew the war was coming. They had woven what Teacher called a spell that lasted from the Second World War to the Third. They ran the industries that poisoned the air. Their businesses turned whole countries into slaves. The money they made could have fed and healed the population of the earth twice over. But all they could think to do with it was hoard it. They made puppets out of presidents. They started wars for profit. And when they pushed the planet too far, they climbed into their holes and sealed the door. One way or another, the future would be theirs. Everyone else could burn. Frank opens fire. The massacre is total. Carbon draws it in panels that glow with muzzle flash and flame. Frank with crossed bandoliers and dual pistols. A dying man moving through the bunker like a force of nature. But the leader survives long enough to beg. He plays Frank a recording, a transmission from the Washington, D.C. bunker. The president and the Secretary of State descending into screaming madness. The L.A. bunker tore itself apart with firearms. Dallas burned off the map. Every other survivor group on the planet went silent within 3 months. They are the last people left alive on Earth, and they have a bank of frozen embryos and the expertise to ensure their survival. The old man says it plainly. We and we alone can save the human race. Frank pauses. He looks at the man who wove a spell from one world war to the next. The man whose greed and arrogance burned the planet to ash. The man who now claims the right to repopulate it. Then Frank kills him. He burns the bunker, he destroys the embryos, he exterminates humanity's last chance at continuation, and does not hesitate. Well, maybe for a second. Paris, dragged from the wreckage, asks Frank the obvious question. What about what the man said? The human race? Frank's answer? You've seen what that leads to. The final pages are among the most devastating in Marvel history. Paris reveals his own crime. He set fire to empty houses for insurance money, except they were next to a kindergarten. Children burned to death. He asks Frank the real question. Did you want to be judge, or could you just not summon the courage for ending it yourself? Frank doesn't answer. Instead, the narration shifts. Frank Castle, dying of radiation poisoning, begins hallucinating. He's headed to Central Park. The traffic is light. A cab should have him there in 20 minutes. He'll get out at West 66th and take the path past Tavern on the Green into Sheep Meadow. He thinks he left his family there. The final panel is a full-page spread. Frank walking alone into a canyon of fire surrounded by skulls and bones while the caption reads, Maybe this time I'll be there in time to save them. Garth Ennis did not write a Punisher story. He wrote the final judgment of the Marvel Universe, dressed it in a skull shirt, and published it on a label Marvel created specifically so they could pretend it did not count. This is a comic where the hero does not save the world. He decides it was never worth saving in the first place. And the most disturbing part is that Ennis spends 48 pages making you wonder if Frank was actually right. Frank Castle did not save the world. He judged it. And Garth Ennis made sure Marvel could never take that back, even if it's not official canon.